Díomh cóide, is mis Hilary Vic Sivna, agus is leictúir le gailge mé I Glucksman Ireland House Ollscoil New Arag. Tá fáilte roimh go léir chuig leacht I Donnabháin 2021. Hello everybody, I'm Hilary Vic Sivna, Irish language lecturer at Glucksman Ireland House, New York University. Before we begin, I'd just like to thank Jerry O'Sullivan for leading us in today with a beautiful tune from his collection O'Sullivan Meets O'Farrell. You're all very welcome to the 2021 Barra O'Donnabháin lecture, which will be delivered today by Manchán Magan. Many of you have attended this lecture in person over the past 15 years. Our format is a little different this year. Agus tá áthas an domhan ormsa, agus an bhíreann go léir in áras na hÉireann, go bhfuil mí dinán leanúnta aiglean ar nócáidín líana. Is é seo ar géad lécht I Donnabháin lína. I and all of my colleagues at Ireland House are delighted that we've been able to continue with our public events series this year in this new format. This is our first O'Donnabháin lecture online, and one positive aspect of this format is that we have attendees joining us today from many locations around the world. This is a bilingual event. Cloisí tú Gaeilge agus Béarla ó hús go deireadh. Bhí aithne ag cuid bhathagaibh Barra O'Donnabháin. Ach tá dramór a goibh linn inniu nach raibh aithne bith acu air. Mar sin, ba bhfuil cúpla focail rá faoi roimh tús na léachta. I would like first of all to say a few words about Barra O'Donnabháin. Batha teanga I labhart about an teanachal ab ansa le Barra, agus ghlach sé gach seans an teanga a labhart ó léanta óige I lep I Donnabháin in ihir Kirky. Fuair sé chuid gailen ar scolar dúis, agus lean sé ásta déir I go láiste na hallscoile Kirkig. Bhag sé an sin go America, agus chuir sé faoi I New Arag, bhí sé posta ar dília nach maran. Agus bhí burt óga acu a níon Máire atá an Sáilín ó Pennsylvania, agus Mac Brendan atá an Sáilín inniu Comá ón Gearmáin. Barra O'Donnabháin was born in Lane I Donnabháin, which is known as Lep in West Cork. After graduating from UCC, he made his way to the United States, to Texas, and then New York, where he met his late wife, Delia. They had 2 children, Maura, who's joined us today from Pennsylvania, and Brendan, who's tuned in today from Germany. Agus Barra socratha I New Arag, hosnig sé ag scríb I Gaeilge. Scríb sé breis agus 300 alt a fáil siach san Irish Echo, nuachtáin na nail an sa I New Arag. Scríb sé de tror, Irish cultus curatóirí éireann, agus duna pápéir fuinse agus saoil. Le linn na tréimhse seo, bhí ag rangan na Gaeilge ag Barra ina gheach féin smíthe. Bhún sé Gaeilge leis an glúiseacht daltaí na Gaeilge, an glúiseacht bunathe ag Ethel Brogan in New Arag. Settled in New York with young children and busy with a career, Barra made time for an Gaeilge. He wrote over 300 articles in Irish for the Irish Echo. He had articles published in Tror, Sail, and Fuinse. And somehow he managed to have weekly Irish language classes in his home and taught at events organised by Daltaí na Gaeilge. Ba old an sail grá Barra don teanga. Agus creid sé go raibh ról lárnach ag an teanga I gcultúr na nail, mar aon le ceol, star agus le tríocht. Creid sé go raibh ar fitte fuaite le céile. Ba gcuine bríomhar, cardúil agus dearfach é, a bhail daoine le céile I gcónaí, cinál ambassador dar gcultúr a bhí ann. And so, to today's presentation. Please note that we will have time for a question and answer session at the end of the talk. If you have a question relating to the talk, please type it into the question and answer dialog box at the bottom of your screens. I will repeat these instructions at the end. Our guest speaker today is Manchán Magan. Is scríb nóir agus creailtóirí Manchán, a bhfuil lear scríofaige I Méarla agus I Gaeilge faoi America Has, an India agus an Afric. Bhíor thóir don comhaontas glas é in ultáchán na bliana 2016. Scríbann sé colún don Irish Times, dar teadal One Change. Tuair scíonn sé faoi cuasaí taistil do RTE Radio 1 agus Virgin Media 1. Agus tá go leor chláracha feisnéise láirithe aige faoi cuasaí cultúr agus éireachta do TG Cahir, RTE agus an Travel Channel. Díríonn sé a leabhar nua 32 words for field ar na tuiscintí faoi cuasaí timpeallachta, anama agus éireachta atá le fáil sa Gaeilge. Beag an leabhartácht ag seo le fáil America go luath ón siomh bookdepository.com. Tá ahanana maithagaing Manchán de bhar a chud ibre d'artedal sí Tamagotchi, nó focail farige, folklór an bhaineann leis an bharige, thuas híos na tíre. Tá tora chud taide mar aon le chóid na fuime le fáil ar siomh féin manchán.com. Choníonn Manchán ina chuil dearach san íormhí I dianta a bhacha agus I cearcha. Manchán Magan has written widely on his travels in Africa, India, and South America. He writes regularly for the Irish Times and presents the Almanac of Ireland on RTE Radio 1. He reports on travel for many radio programs and has presented dozens of documentaries on issues of world culture for TJ Cahir, RTE, and the Travel Channel. And he's well known in the Irish language community for his various creative initiatives, including the documentary No Barra, the Gaeilge Tamagotchi, and now the Sea Tamagotchi, highlighting vocabulary of the sea from a variety of locations. All of this may be accessed on his website, manchán.com. His latest book, 32 Words for Field, explores the insights the Irish language offers into the landscape, psyche, and heritage of Ireland. This book has been extremely well received, published by Gill in 2020, and it will soon be available in the United States from bookdepository.com. So, Tanga agus timpalacht, cultúr agus mion winter na Héireann, Thuras Erlína thóir spirit anam agus ruin díomhracha na Héireann, inné, inniu agus mórach. Language, culture, landscape, and psyche. A journey, exploring these interwoven trails which create a map of Irishness, yesterday, today, and tomorrow. A ghuinniúisle Seiamh Manchán Magan.
Ramila Mahaga Hillary, bhí sé sin códas mar toast. Camera is more on an or dumsa, on lechtse a hort in the nord, Barra o Donnabháin. You know, dinner again, Irishness Donnabháin. So it is such an honor for me to talk and to address this talk in honor of Barra o Donnabháin. What I want to cover today is bevailam kúpla leirga sa hort díobhse. Na tiiscintí a lá tála fáil tríd an Ghaeilge Irishin Réimsí don Tel. What I would love to do today is to cover some of the insights that the Irish language can give us into so many different aspects of our life. So beidir an timpolacht, gan out the environment, an nádur, nature, an sail invanach, an sail navho isach, agus few an sail osná dúja. So the life of consciousness, the internal world, and even, sorry, I'm dying here, and even the insights that the language can give us into the other worlds. Agus gohaid heb bevailim diru an taobh buinean don scéal, dearcan an manáibh, no beidir cuacht na maná atá le fáil sa Ghaeilge. So maybe the primary thing is this female perspective that is such a key element of the Irish language and the Irish language's rootedness to the wider world. Is Michigan out on dinner heart can they show hort ach féidlam túsacher le cúpla chef de scapa geméidir gojuchachtíine a wad níos fear ná mise, níos leinta ná mise, níos tiisciní ná mise gojuchach a miníag I miíag agus denach ábhar cart. Like I am obviously the wrong gender to be exploring the femininity of the landscape and the insights that the female consciousness can give us through the language. But nonetheless, I can't change my gender at this hour. Stoilm an rud go bhailim sa tosnúle ná an chéad tiiscint atá a gcuin ón tanga seo agus ón tanga féin agus an dearca bhí a gcuin dar gúlra. So the first way of beginning is probably with the very roots of what we know about this language and our history, and that has to be in written form, just because now we live in a sail bhfuil bunathe an focail nach bhfuil an seanachas cóláidir is a bhíoch. So we're now living in this literary world, where the oral literature is not as important, is not as key as it once was. So stocha an chéad tagart atá gin ná beidir well an tagart is soléide ná san éanúis déag. So the clearest insights we have into our own history and the use of the Irish language to explain that is back in the 11th century, where there was books of like the most extant version of the Leabhar Gavála, of the Book of Invasions. And tá tagart down though, don ban seo dar banam César, agus Jaharle, dar brandam adra on Shanna on kind of on dinner shaunda, the ancient adra agus before Caesar agus be ahar. Agus han focal sin be fósarolas again. So if the oldest people ever to set foot in Ireland, the people who came before us, according to our ancient written accounts that were based obviously on Shanachas and on Bailidus, that were written on the oral accounts that go back way back. Accordingly, Caesar was the first and her brother Adra, and then their father Be. Now we know Be, Kadakilian Be, Be, Rud Be, Gachrud Be, means everything, means the universe, means the cosmos, means everlasting being and existence. So Tigamid, an Caed Fuin of Celta, Gahanig and so, the rare on Tangashaw, Isha Gaheni. And just to have a language in the modern world that has this connection to the very spark of existence that ever came, and calls it everything, and creates it into a little mythology, a nice story about a brother and sister and their father, is really potent. Achaniag sin gone out Hana Myrna. After these first inhabitants, we came. Agus inis tá clár telefíse díarach déanta gomsa, well in Nirig yana said the TG Cahar, dar title DNA Kailte. Agus séir bhí gceisna seo na gar sé díú an taide is déanaí le cuasaí DNA though. So last year I made a TGCAR series, which is on the TGCAR player on tgcar.ie, called Lost DNA, and it explores what the DNA research is exploring about ourselves. And it says that we hear that my people, my blood lineage, my DNA lineage has been on this island for 4,000 years, on Chreoish, from the Bronze Age. Agus rivishin vi dine gandout a hánig roin go chroig lehedi Donnabháin agus na shared corti untacha. People who came before us, the Neolithic people who built the great monuments, the great henges and the great monuments of Newgrange and the passage tombs. Agus an son riv shield arish gandout vi na knosaha, the sort of the gatherers and the hunters, the sheliga agus knosaha. Who we're not really related to. We're slightly related to the Neolithic people. But we know we've been on this island for this long, and we know this is how far our roots go back. Agus an slígan neran an miutas, go gurin an miutas é seo chun cín, ná go neran siad dúis gan that tháinig Caesar, ní raibh gaeilge in lo. So just like the DNA says, there was a people who we are not related to, which is them, these people who are from everything. And then there was Amergain and his people. Who is Amergain? Amergain is obviously the first poet, the first Druid that we sent to Ireland to manifest the lands. Agus taisig for vorgain na focal ludocha, am gwe, am wed, am ton trehen, am fuim mara, am dav shach nirrand. I am the wind on the sea. I am the strong wave. I am the sound of the sea. I'm Dav Shach Nirrand, I'm the stag of 7 times or 7 battles. In this way, Amergain chroig se an tír more timple through cuach na vocal. He created the world from the power of the word. And it's derter deran on mutus or mutus and beldus gur hále sé seo sa séchéad riv Christ. The mythology says this happened in 700 BC. Obviously, it was closer to us Neolithic people came 4,000 years ago. But, dates wasn't the particular key element of our Shanachas. It was maintaining the key elemental story. Agus chunas a chamadamer an tolas seo bio. Chamadamer bio satanga. Chamadamer bio na vocal. Agus sin is stocha an rud is tachti condidu maider lesh an tanga, maider lesh an réilen. Is she an réilen ceann das na tanga chafir arsa seo. So the key element to bear in mind with the Irish language is that Irish is one of these truly ancient languages, the likes of Sanskrit or Estrangelo or even Sumerian. There's nothing, it is just, there's nothing great about the Irish language. It is just part of the truly ancient languages. Agus taid fir exu on the tangacha nuishacha lady Spanish, Caramanish, Berla. They are very, very different from modern languages. So the rare on Shanachas Moor, it's carried the Vias Geshes Shanachas Moor, Daisigan Grav Lar Moor Reelhagan. We know that we have ancient law texts or law wisdom going back thousands of years. It was finally encoded and then written down on manuscripts, and the earliest versions of those captures this thousands of years old knowledge on a manuscript. And one of it says, How do we keep the knowledge alive? What is the preserving shrine, is the words they use. And Costa, the translation of the answer is not hard, it is memory and what is preserved in it. Mar sin, bhí an seanachas na smuointe go léir dar sínsir na mílte bliain siar via dar lastig don tanga. We kept our knowledge encoded in memory in the words. A chuig o gluin go gluin, o bail go bail, har na mílish. We pass down this knowledge. Ach an son der terish. But really, what is the preserving shrine? It repeats that same question. How is all of this memory? The information fui aharu roide, fui the changing of climate, fui na canary exula viaun, fui na nihe spiridalta a har le doing, fui na unmade aula miamer, fui kunas glasrias, agus kunas marachtan ter ilanin biog scaredu. Immel and Atlantic. All the information we learned about lineages, about spiritual knowledge, about how to survive on a windswept wild island was preserved in the language. And so the Shantas Moor, the great storehouse of this knowledge, says, how do you preserve it? You preserve it in the memory. But again, it says, how do you preserve it? Not hard. It is nature and what is preserved in it. Tá an ar nairucht geleid, kwevnaha, lashtir, lashtig don timpelach, lashtig dus na krin, na karigracha, an shrei. Tá sé sin fear láidir, mar sé sin díreach an túirim céanna, agus an tuiscint céanna atá ag bundúchasig fud an down. This is a key element, because this knowledge that our memory, our ancestral knowledge and wisdom is preserved within the sea, within the soil, within the rock, within the waves and the trees, is clearly, we recognize that as an indigenous way of seeing the world. Tá sé sin fear éagsúil or forvor na hoidepa. It is a very, very different outlook from the rest of the EU, from the rest of modern Europe, and definitely from North America today. So, nuair a Tommy de Smuineh, cé an role atá ag an Ghaelan, agus ag na Héranig sa Dáwan Mór, Cahamid, Clí agus fechan drone na bundúchasig, na díine a bhfuil a chónaí an áit na mílte bliain. When we are trying to find the role of the Irish language and the role of the Irish people in the world, we need to have the courage to get over our traumatic colonial past and have the courage to look at ourselves in terms of native people, of almost indigenous people. Kinta mar dort me vidin and so rowing ach hamid and so le kerami le blian agus hakid dus nadina of rowing fos unning. So we are here, indeed, we're not the most ancient people here. There were people before us who built Nouth and Lochcrew and Newgrange, but we have some of their DNA inside of us, and we have been here 4,000 years. Agus céirdíad na daoine a chamad an tolas sugar bio na drícha. It was the Druids who kept this information alive. An gaché an sort tolas, an tolas fui na starathe, fui na scéalta, fui na miotas, fui na gasan na dríchta a bhéidir na doing, as go háide fui na ginnalig. It was the Druids who kept all of this ancient knowledge alive about, as I say, farming knowledge, genealogical knowledge, spiritual knowledge, spell knowledge. Vi sé go léir a co. Agus do bhar an star a bhí a gcuine gan dá tána dríthe imethe. I mean, of course, the Druids are now gone, but dastrig na dríthe stach role na fili. So an role of ag na dríthe hog na fili unta. Hánig na Padraig sa chuig gois, when Christianity came in the 5th century, they put an end to the Druids, the Druid forces. But their power, their ability to take a word and to memorize things in an oral tradition and then to pass down extra knowledge through words was given to the file, to the poet. And that's why the poet had the ability with language. The language could manifest things. Fear háchtach ach arish níl sé eiskach tú. There is nothing exceptional about this. Shut rud vi ingach culture fear shaunda. This is just the normal of things in ancient cultures. So few and fucker, we need to look at the Irish language Ó tá sé sin og chailimar sin. Se Tom se sin is stocha Landamarm agus ní lisagam few Neelam Kinta how far I got there. I'm going to pick up at the idea of Druids again, if I may, and apologies for that. This idea of the Druid was the person who kept our language alive and our culture alive. That word Druid, Taginsha on Focal Drig, and Druid refers to two things. Dru, it's from the oak tree, or the total connection with the or almost the axis mundi, with the tree of life. This rootedness, one human figure having within him a connection with the other worlds. And then vid, Druid. Vid is from vid, the Vedas, the Sanskrit knowledge, or idus, it's the same word, idachas or idus, knowledge. It is all the same root, of course, because we came from that central culture. So, Hánig an chultúir seo cuaing agus tá irid sin focail go vector nó céanna mar tachta ara a minister in Irish is obviously an ara gnohig achtracha. That's the same word as Arya, as the Aryan people, the noble race in India. Focail nos Bjehav, judge, is the same as Brahman. The focail, even the Brahman survived by knowing the Bje, with the mantras. He was the master of the mantras of the Bje. Dírach sa tlí chéanas bhí an drí bhí an sean ólas again, sean tólas and sean seanachas again, trí na bhocail. This knowledge was preserved, was kept down through the ages, through the words. So sinnatá geistigan nuair a táimí de chaint faoi an tanga seo. Tanga go bhfuil an tólas cuimhnathe le stigda, agus camid an tuiscin sin a bheith again. Ach, mar a dúirt me, ní bháin go raibh na focail cumáta le stig don focail féin agus na frásí seo ach bhíodar le stig don talamh. Agus sé sean rud is táchtaí, mar gan dat bí ban í an talamh, bí ban dia í an talamh. Is cum a céan slí a bhecin tú go háiris decha an slí is soléire gan fechan tuirtí ná mar an cailach. So the key element is, not only is our language preserved within the language, but it was preserved in the landscape. And the landscape was female. It was a Mother Earth goddess. Arish ní rud eisceachtú lei seo tá sé le fáil fud an domhain. Agus an céad céim atá chun fechantar seo ná na loganimnacha. The first step of exploring how knowledge is kept within the landscape is through the place names, na loganimnacha. Agus an din seanachas. Agus céirtá geis an din seanachas. An din seanachas is sé an tólas atá le stig animnacha áite. So din seanachnas is the lore of notable places. Agus tugann sé le fist na heachtrií a hála in áite le agus an tionachar a bhí an ag áit na daoine bhí an ann agus na hanamh atá an freisin. So díreach cad a harlíonn nuair a hagan duine nó anamh is stach is spás áide. Agus sé sin atá gceist na rí leis an din seanachas. So what the din seanachas, the lore of place names conveys is the essence of a place and the impact it has on humans and animals that enter that place. Agus tá sé beagán cosúil le na churunga lines, le na song lines atá ag na bundúchasig san Austrráid. It's a little bit similar to the churunga lines, the song lines of the Aboriginals in Australia, where an Aboriginal person can go out and sing sounds, not even sounds that make sense, ach fuimina áirithe go grothíonn an timpolacht mór timpeolaithe. Agus tugann siad le fist, dus na daoine atá ag siúil sa tíreach seo, cá bhfuil an tuisce le fáil, cad a hála san áite fadó riamh, céan ólas atá faoi aharú éráide, aharú mara a hála san áit. So the songlines can give someone, a native person who's tuned into them, the knowledge of what happened in a place thousands of years ago, where the water holes are, what are the ancient geological formations of the place, the coastal changes that have happened, and the climactic impact. Tá sé sin le fáil a bheag nó bhór a din seanachas, gan dat ní féidir an chumparráid go thomláin ar dhéanamh leis, ach tá tuiscintí le fáil I ngachéim loganimnacha, agus tá na loganim seo fós, le fáil ar gachéim court and bóthar. These place names, thank God, are still so clear to us all in Ireland, and they still will open up these insights to us. Mavian and Fine again. Tug mar hampla bell on the briscum muyo. So on the road between Cong and Claremorris, this little town Bell on the Briskin, you wouldn't even think anything about it until you see how it's translated in Irish on this road sign, and it says Bale a baile áhan Briscan, the town of the ford of the Briscan. And Briscan was a type of wild tansy. Go raibh cuacht úntach aige, mar hig dína fadó gur thug sé cosint de fiol de bhar go raibh bulla aige le hánig as gur nar hahan leis na míl tóga agus gur chmáid amach uig. So tansy was able to protect raw meat in a way. It gave out some fumes or smell that made animals, and particularly flies that would bring maggots to the meat, avoid it. So we sé fear lochvar. Ach ní havanson. Ach vi on Briscan, on tansy, richtenach the mana fresh. Not only this, but the tansy was also vital for women at particular times to induce abortions and miscarriages. So mahagami den an lug animation, bella on Briscan, tigamid gomlan, goref shemar rawa, goref shemar pisa chorle davina, sa timpelach fado, agus few gach shans gref mana et tachtown, dean nach stiha, con Briscan hogant, da medish driblod. It was just a little key within the landscape to give women knowledge that they might need to control their own fate, to control their own lives. Sound pleile of Rálum na Lochan Lay in County Cavan. Rish Neil Moran le Tishkinton Fokachin Lochan Lay. Ach ma striamtu go gwelne tigantu gur Lochan Laya, Lochan Lega, the lake of the physician. No better Lochan Lice, the lake of the cure. Agus fechan to Timplanish. You look now around this place, this hillside in County Cavan of Lochan Lay, and you don't really see much. But then when you hear that there was a lake in there, and the lake had a physical cure and was connected with a magical physician, you look around. Agus gotubban fechan to go gwyl frech ig fos. Saisna ti fiú le frech agus fiú aten. Agus sailog. Agus tigan to an son go revanation nís fluchen when you see the name and you realize that the name is telling you this, there was a lake here which had curative powers. You look around again and you see the heather, you see the reeds, you see the willow, and you realize this is a once wet area that would have had this lake in it. And so one thinks, okay, it was a sacred lake. Why was it a sacred lake? Agus deran denegen lats night grab ban aun, grab she turjara da gower for do. Agus gavakashi saidori sasnig a tachtin in ain. Again, I'm ken the rain a ping lihe. Right to be sagart a gran afrin, a cloch afrin in akale. Agus chnick she na saidori exug she rawad and sagart. Agus da warson, vi an sagart in an elu. Agus vi drich bintach leis loch. So a local will tell you a story when you're in the area that there was a woman, Peggy Dunt, during the penal laws, who happened to see the redcoats, the British soldiers, arrive when a priest was saying mass on a mass rock out in the remote area by the lakeside, and she was able to warn the priest, and the priest was able to escape. Ach sa scale seo derach mint in the heart to lat, go raibh clocha leistig the áprún on van seo. Agus go chashi na plocha I dro an sagart on us go dugach sé ra I dro a gower fein on us go rehech na gower go dugach she rawad and sagart. So the story, the local would tell you that this woman, the Peggy Dunt, would pick into her apron pocket, and she'll pick up stones and throw them at the goats so the goats go down to the priest and warn the priest. Agus go toppen nor a chlusintuation tigan to go rud a vadni shaunda agest. When you hear these words, well, you understand that there's something a lot more ancient, because that story that a woman, a powerful woman that sees things that other people don't see and then will throw stones down from her apron is exactly the description of the kailach that has created the sacred cairns, the sacred spiritual points, the sacred almost acupuncture points in the landscape all over Ireland. We often hear in Lough Crew and other places that the Cailleach, the great female matriarchal figure, flew through the sky and dropped these stones on it. And so suddenly this one place name opens up realms of different understandings of the landscape. It strips away kind of strachan shir na milish and this fekami druddy atavadnis soleida. Beidir an sampla is far fadda seo, agus gaché an sampla tugin sé tishkinti doing sail na manáv. Every insight leads back to a female understanding, because this was a female world. This language at heart is a female world. Tá sé dacre sin eccinnis, mar tá struchtúr an Christiachas cuite na Christiachta cuite It's hard to see that this was a female culture, a female language, a female landscape, because the impact of Christianity has been so strong. Ach tóg mar hampla an focail sin, an focail the Boyne. Just even take the example of the Boyne River. The Boyne River. And what do we get? Boyne doesn't sound very much. It doesn't sound very impactful. But you translate it into Irish, you get Boinda. On Boyne, on the Boyne, no Boinda. And we know that Boinda was a Mother Earth goddess. She was a sacred goddess who nourished her people by being part of nature, by being the landscape and the sun and the rain and the seasons. Connected to Cailleach, who was also the seasons. All these mother goddesses were intertwined. Agus an scale, fui Awan the Boyne. So Taiskin, Awan the Boyne, the beautiful Boyne River that goes through that Newgrange and Nouth and Douth are all positioned on the sides of, is the sacred area for the people who came before us, the Neolithic people, and that we in turn kept alive and kept sacred. Agus cada derter fui an scale fui Boinda, got a bandia go raibh fistrach, bhí breis ólis á lorgacha, breis nasc leis an dáhan ile chuachtach, leis an dáhan geléir, agus thuaisi á thóir go dtí tubar banathe. So what we know about Boinda, the mother goddess, this powerful figure, she wanted to become even more wise, more knowledgeable, more connected to the universe, to everything, leis an éantacht umlán, to the universal oneness. And she goes in search of this wisdom and truth, Gadi a tuber, she goes to a sacred well. And of course, the wells are nothing more than these female openings in the landscape, openings into the expanse, into the eternal other worlds of that womb, that life-creating entity. Now, Arish, ní sanoli mission, I'm no expert, and none of this, tá sé onna yakar gemech an fieraki buinte leis. So cad is féidir le denmh cahamid tola seo, éisteach leis an tola seola seo, agus fechant an lasan sé lochran eigen uning féin. All we can do, like I am no expert in nothing, and these are all vague ideas. So the only thing we can do is look at our own culture. An Iricht féin humma agus kind of a hira agus fechant an bri. We need to just comb through our own heritage and see if there's meaning in it for us. So these female openings, these orifices in the landscape, the holy wells, the Boinda, the mother goddesses, goes to one that is particularly, known for its knowledge. And of course, what happens? She is drowned. Agus titan she illiga, titan she maravan and dalav, agus trohitar awan as a harp. She dies, she falls into a slumber, into a heap on the ground, and her great body becomes the Boyne River. And so in this way, tugan she kuhu don the winter na heart more timpler. She nourishes the people around her with the great nourishment of her waters, creating the floodplains, creating the fertile lands on either side of the Boyne River. But Kamid Sminov, Chuig Mariachi, Kailachi, Tushkahushi ar Horolis. She died because she dared go for knowledge to the wells. Ervation Diak her Nasagart, her on kind of on quote Christa Ivine. Was that a particular angle that the Christian church put on this story to sort of show this is what happens with uppity women, with women who go looking for more knowledge, that they end up getting their just deserts. So, nor a Tommy de Kira and the Shan Skeltisha, agus and Shan Mutus, agus and Tolus, a tall steer dun danga, a stig dun danga. Kami de Goni sween of unfadeling untiva veheguin, so juntas. Whenever we are exploring our language and the way that our language has been protected and preserved in stories, we need to question the veracity of those who wrote down those stories, often Christian monks, often with their own agenda. And then they were translated in the 19th and 20th century by well-meaning men. My cousin Tia O'Rahilly, one of the key translators of the early 20th century, and then his sister Cecil O'Rahilly, my also cousin who I spent all my Christmases with, who translated the Tarn Book Cuilna. These were well-intentioned, incredibly intelligent people, but they were of their time, So there's an onus on all of us to go back to these myths, to go back to this heritage that our people have miraculously kept alive. O gloin go gloin mar dúirt, o bhéal go bhéal, ca ha mídna nistal siad cuatha, ag úsáid na chuirlísí agus na hachfaní go léir atá lína agus fechant an bhfuil tachtarach nua dúine go háirig an amseo go bhfuil go chéanrad ag a harú. It is our obligation to now go back to these old mythologies and stories that were preserved by ancestors, to use the resources online to see, is there new knowledge in them for us? So mar dortme, Peshkele, on Boinda, the mother goddess becomes the Boyne River. And what do we see in the Rechmi, the Rishar and Tiddleshire, Boinda, Boin, Kiln, Briataga, as I said, Bo is it's a mother goddess, but where does that word come from? Bo is a cow. Okay, and it's actually the same word, according to linguists, as Govinda. It's another version, and Govinda is a Hindu god. It is a god who is another form of Krishna. And again, why would we in Ireland have the same god? It's culture in the order Shina Ilig. Tagamid on the Frevacha Kiana. We all come from the same roots. So it's natural we have the same people. So Govinda, go is the Sanskrit for cow, just like Bo is the Irish for cow. Vinda means finder, or seeker. It is the sacred cow animal that goes out into the world then. And just as the Boyne River nourishes her people with her plentiful teats, the Boinda, the mother goddess, the milk goddess, nourishes her people with the mother cow with her eternal supply of milk. So Eantro Echamid, Satangasha, Beg Lergashi, Beg Tishkanti Nua Le Foilegain. Agus Tamid in Aum Fear Lochfer, Gahaiden is Gavilna Keshna Morisha Tachtlesh Keen, Conceen, Kunnas the Harting, Marachten Sadawansha, Gavil share the Og in Tachter and Tolisha, just at a point now where we need new answers to how we're going to live in this world. It is perfectly in keeping that this knowledge is now coming forth. Arish, Shliela Gavechamid Gavil Farvor dun Tolis, Farvor dun Soinolisha, Lashtig the Figuri Bwinnen. Another way of seeing that this knowledge, so much of it is encoded in female forms, that as we said, the Christian church tried to block out, is she had three town moor na héireann. So dúrach fadó, der éan Miotas gus Beli described three town moors. It was always said in the Shanachas, in the old lore, that there were three great waves of Ireland, three female waves. Agus, but tunta iad, tunta fuime, agus tunta mara, tunta farige. So these were sound waves and sea waves. Town Cliana, town Rudriga, agus town Tuihe. Agus Rishid more timple a host, a Hussans and Tyr. They raced around the island, protecting the island, but also uniting it, binding it, controlling its very existence. Dírach Marianach Beidir on grime atá idir ha molecule in it. It is this molecular almost knitting together of the land at the three great waves. Agus Tigamid govilla their fear shaunda. We know that these waves have been known about for thousands of years. Mar Amergain and Kead Dri and Kead Filig and Nort Megahana Gehere is Shach Gead Riv Christ. Amergain, our first Druid, was brought to Ireland by a wave. He was rescued from the stormy seas and dropped there by one of the three great waves. Ach Rivishin Arish, Lu on dia, Lu don solas no Lu lavada, on dia the skillini, the alien, the don solas e fein. Derter, gonna be a head or gahanisha gehaja riv o tier na nog, gonna be at town clean, town ruida, agus town tui fight river. So even before the time of Armageddon, it's said that the great first supernatural God that almost created the light, that created the skills, that created the existence of Ireland, was welcomed by these great waves. Nish on Shanachas of all in the town, so of an Kielish Sadawan Noah. The rare Tirolaha, Idaha, Kinta, Ta Olus Pranach Hound. Does any of this sort of bladder, these mythological stories about waves, have any relevance for us today? Well, if we look at what geographers are saying now, they're saying that these three great waves, Gameder gur Smuin of Iad, Dun Glushach the Harla, nor vi on Lagair Eglai, 10,000 no 5,000 blian deag o hen an Dalifsha. So Trace Ray and Ire, after the end of the last ice age, vi Tigamid, Grev and Lagair eg Kulu Sheed, a Kulu o Huig, Gedi Alapan Agus Gedi Istoch in Iceland, so Troshin, when the ice sheets were retreating back up to Scotland and up to the North Pole, Ta Isagin, Grev Natilt Ishke. Grev Rauer Tomur Ishke eg Suamach on Dalav. Grev she eg kind of excure in Nache and Tro, floods of water were skimming in every direction. Agus and Rudge capan Tirola hinish, gur bev on Ishtischke, gur on Tiddle and Son town Ruidin, the town Rudriga. What geologists now, town Rudriga would have been the water, the flood water coming out of the glacial ice sheet in Loch Ness, Gerhonig, Machas, Loch Ness, Points Pass, came into Points Pass, and then down into Carlingford Loch and round into Dundrum. Agus derter few Salar Donnabháin, go gluster, agus go vector town Rudriga. I was in Castlewellan a few years ago, in looking out over Dundrum Bay in County Down, and they tell me they still know of town Rudriga today. They hear it and they see it. Mar héanna le town Tuiche, derter going to be town Tuiche, on Tischke a bhí ag sille agus ag scuaba amach o idro o Var o Tuiskert Loch Ness, that the water was flooding out of the glacier at the top of Loch Ness, down the North Bann River, and then out into the sea. And you can see a gravel sandbank, Ilan Rathlin. You can see a sandbank that was created on Rathlin Island by this massive floodwater washing off the land. Again, 10, 11, 12,000 years ago. Tá deisiaun go méidir go bhfuil cuid dus na himachtaí a hála an son, nuair a bhí na céad lucht sellige agus fioch a tachtar an áit seo demíon a bliana hain go bhfuil na rudaí go bhacatar cuimhne le stig den tanga. So some of the experiences, some of the sights that the first hunter-gatherers experienced when they arrived on the island as the ice sheets were retreating and the floodwater was washing off is still encoded within our language. Tá sé sin éachtach. Agus cinnte tá sé fíor eisceach dú. Ní bhaidfá a le héad I díre eile na Hoireapa. Seohí an cuacht atá leis an Ghaeilge. Go háide ag am go bhfuil gá linn díriú na choris seandan ná dúise seo, agus na rithimí a bhí an leis at a time where it is vital that we tune into these ancient circuits, these climactic time lags that happen over millennia. The fact that we might have some of this information encoded, tá sé fianna seán go bhfuil an tóla seo le fáil ag dul siar ní bhán 10,000 bliain nach 50,000 bliain san Austrál. It's been proven that Aboriginal culture can remember information going back, further back than 10,000 years, 20,000 years and more. So, Cami de ved osculta, go méidir go bhfuil an tóla seo le feiscint in Asian fós. Agus Arish is manav, is bandéha, is cuachti buinen agoni atashishab winterlas. All of these are female goddesses, are information encoded within female energy sources. Ramarashkadian Kailach Arish and Kailach. Let's go back to the Kailach. Kailach has been wizened down, has been withered down so much now. The Kailach, is translated as the witch or the hooded, the cloaked figure. We see her on her broomstick in Halloween. And she is so much more potent than that. Agus is fuine atá sé dul siad agus an tólas breise áin. Tá dán agus gnéirtar tá tiddle an Cailach bheag an ásig. There's a poem, there's a passage of text, of early text, called The Little Cailach of the Wild. And she talks in this passage, this poem, and in it she states, Dúr bhahan airige mhór in the cuile chunig glas, bevis an bhirnig óg. So that an farige mhór in the cuile chunig glas, the time when the great sea was a great mossy wood. Agus sweening few gur féidirling an Seanrail and seo hiiscint and just think that we can remember this language from maybe far back as the 8th century AD, that we can still understand it today in modern Irish just by tuning our ears a little bit. So, an chéad piece of this in dúr bhí an farige mhór na cuile chunig big, the time when the great sea was a great mossy wood. Bhí mise am bhurnig óg, I was a young girl. So she's saying, the time when the great sea was a great mossy wood, I was a young girl. Nish cén tólas atá gin, the great sea shed Atlantic. Agan an Atlantic adá gestan so. Agus deran she go raibh uirbháin nach raibh an Atlantic ann, go raibh Talavan lawn the Quilta. What she's saying is that yes, before the Atlantic Ocean, there was a time that she remembers where there was a great landmass, a forested landmass. And of course, we know from glacial studies that that's exactly what happened. There was the Pangaea, the supercontinent, that was then broken up by the shifting plate tectonics into the Eurasian plate that we sat upon and the North American plate. Agus mar sin an chúisce vector na sais na caragracha céanna an dá héh don luchan, don farige seo. The reason that we see the same glacial formations, the same rock formations, and even the same fossil remnants in the Blue Ridge Mountains of Kentucky and the Appalachian Mountains of the Carolinas and Virginia, that they share the exact same rock strata, like a jigsaw puzzle le Tuaisceart na hÉireann with Northern Ireland, is because of that. We were one. Tá tóla sin a gcuin inis the word an díon ibre in sanolaithe na hOllscoile. We know this because of the amazing studies done by geologists. Ach, tá sé seanachas cuma. Well, tá cóirtha go méidir go bhfuil sé seanachas cuma, I should say. It seems that it is still encoded within the mythology too. That is something powerful. Siad seo na cúise nach féidirling an teanga seo a réigean ag an am seo. Tá an nummarcha ólas agus tuiscint cuachtach ann ná bhuilimís tréis cíd go fóid. There's too much insights in this knowledge that we've only begun to touch upon. You know, Pauline Elike, she has another line that I'll translate into English. I had chariots and horses then, given by admiring kings. I drank mead and wine with them. Bhí sean úr go raibh an ban dia cuachtach agus gur thug na bhaidimh uail agus amós de. This was a time when society knew that the power was with women, and the men would give them what chariot and horses. They would, by admiring kings, they would give them mead and wine in respect of their great potency, their ability to create life, their untuiscint bhí go a chu rudí díomharach rún de dríochta táchta. Agus beidir go be an element is soléide gur an the sun. Maybe the most clear remnant of this knowledge that was protected by women is in the medicinal field. The ólas leis ag mnáibh suascadíle déanaí an áíre tá sé fós ann. Women had knowledge of medicine right up until the present day. It still exists. Tá sé cúlathe gemór. Tá sé ide gemór. It has retreated a lot, but it is still there. The Issaco fi rudí nos brat. They knew things about the brat, the film on the animal's eye that was healed by hare's blood, or in Schlaunon, the sly in the eye that was cured with a poultice of bread and cat's urine, actually. And they knew about the fuilach fridaid. They knew about the ferret's milk, agus on lice again, the casach dog, the cure it gave for a bad cough. Agus garbedo and turn schlee con fridaid a chrú no of land, that the only way of milking a fridaid was by using a preslach, a gag or a rod secured in a ferret's mouth. The antolus sho egg cailach. The wise woman, the unban immelch, the woman at the edge had that knowledge. Agus is queen and fós. Few imhale fame. Dort me chanavá her lum. Gnur visio vech ban timpel, da mech lanav time sa tig. Agus rach si stach sin tig, chasach si os chun on lanav og. Agus derach si, nis nu vern gael nag am vansha. So my granny remembers long ago, if there was a sick child in the household, a woman, a sort of mysterious otherworldly woman, would go around the houses and she'd stand over the sickbed of the poor child. And she'd say, she'd know Irish now, and she'd say, a cark cootin lek na sho, a cark cootin lek na sho. And sure enough, the child would be cured within a few weeks. And the mother of the house would give her some sugar or eggs or something and send her on her way. But she had the ability to do that. Agus mar vi an cuach la stig the power was in the words. It was an incantatory power, just like Amr again right at the first time when we arrived. The language could manifest things. When we listen to the sentence in Irish, we hear a cark cootin lek na sho, a chak and lek na sho, oh hen, take on these mumps for yourself. It is the ritual of transference found in indigenous people all over the world. It is a natural thing. Rish vi rodella dummerskere dien galler fulische, donnerskere o and donnerskere an ab my idmach. Nish ta sheshin nach more so doing rish. It was another phrase that was said for someone in a large prostrate. The words alone didn't make full sense, but they were in Irish and they could manifest what was needed. Sho iad on Jacka gahami togant agus shin ag smuin of an Relden. go bhfuil si tuachtach, cuachtach, go bhfuil dríocht le stigde, go bhfuil ólas táchtach le stigde go gahamid cuamh nu. Agus is stocha gur be an ólas is táchtaí doing an ish. I suppose the most important information that is encoded within her for us now is se ólas faoi cuisaí eicólaíochta, faoi an dimpeacht. The key element that this language can give us insights into now that is vital is ecology and the environment. Agus sé ríisteach an sample is soléire de sin ná figure buinen ella. The greatest example of this is another female form on glas gainach, the speckled magical cow who would give as much milk as the community needed. So dead fá í of lá, dead fá a crew o whiten gehíhe agus tugach sí baine the ein a bocht ein the gunef ga and gater. This cow would nourish anybody in need from morning to night. Ach gan daut hánig fear luchtach, fear gangadach, fear ealdver, fear saintver. Of course, a greedy, mischievous, malevolent man comes along and sees, can I exploit this ever-giving source of nature, this nourishing mother, maternal force, the Glasgainach? And he says to her, will you fill my vessel for me? And of course she says, come out. Líana me éan síocht éana an éair. Of course she says, I'll fill any vessel for anybody at all. And he brings along a sieve, and he asks her to fill the sieve. And as the story goes, agus an scéal seo I ngach éan counter, I ngach éan stride vaile, I ngach éan paroiste. This story was in every parish, in every townland in Ireland, even when I was growing up. The Glasgainach. He would bring the sieve, and she gladly filled the sieve. And he milked her all day and all night. And he milked her the next day and the next night. And her milk kept on filling the sieve and, of course, kept on pouring out until eventually she was empty. She her lawn. Agus be full via tachtamach as and son. It was then blood that was coming out of her teats. And he went on milking her until she was flat dead and she collapsed on the ground. She She was a supernatural animal, so she was able to come back to life again. Nomaid yen, hog she around agus dimig she, reg she and sailed down the shop. The moment she came back to life, she took her calf and she fled. She abandoned us because we had abused her, we had exploited her. Sin son ach scale of on, tá na céirta scale telle, go dugach, go dhearóig sinne, go gurimi darash bohernai lasa sin. That's just one of countless ecological theme stories in the Irish language that if we allow it to, will redirect us back onto the road of sustainability, of honoring particularly the female energy, the female gods that are in every single thing. Ní raibh deisigam faoi fiú caint faoi áine, agus gráine, agus unrian. I don't even have a chance here to talk about the great female goddess of Anya and her sister Grania, who is the same as Grian, who is the sun, who was the Tuatha Dé Danann, the people of the Tuatha, the people of the god of Day, of Danann, of Anu, most likely of Anu, of Anya. We are these people that came from this magnificent sun god of Munster, where the sun, where we first see the heat coming from the south of Ireland, where we first see the rays coming up from this heat, where we first see the animals, the sun animals migrating back from Africa. This is where our God comes from, the heat, the sun, the light of this female goddess. And even today, the Eastana, we worship our greatest artistic figures, we put them into this organization, the Eastana. Really, it's the people of Anya. The people of this female goddess. Anyway, Níl Almagam, I don't have time to go into the details of the amount of elements of female knowledge that is in this landscape, that is in this Shanachas. Gwyl biofos gahaida sa timpel, sa Shanachas, agus sa Tangasha, agus is foine atashe, dul a hurishk. The endless knowledge and wisdom of women, of female energy and natural sustaining life-giving energy that is in the landscape, that is in the storytelling, and that is in the language, is there ready for us to immerse ourselves in. Agus mar sin an rud go bhrálam go dhéanach gaché an duine in a nóir baró Donnabháin, go gasamís na faointí seo a rééis, tá go héascail a fáil nidalín, agus go bheiceimid unbhfuil and Olus ruined Donnabháin. What I would love in honor of Barra of Donnabháin, that all of us would seek out these very easily accessible sources online now of our own mythology and see, do they speak to us in some way? Do they have a message to give us in these challenging times? Ma bhíle buchas, Díobh go léir, agus tá brónarm go hep ar an internet, and I am sorry that the internet challenged for a little bit. Slán go.
Gur míle maithagat an sin Manchán. Gosh, that was a wonderful talk, or perhaps a journey. That hour has gone by so quickly. I can't believe it. We had 2 short breaks in transmission, for which I apologize. I can only think that maybe there was a puka somewhere knocking about and causing some trouble for us. As I mentioned earlier, we can have a Q&A session thanks to this webinar format, and we have some time. So anyone who'd like to ask Manchán a question can type it into the Q&A dialog box at the bottom of your screen. And in the meantime, I would just have a quick question while we're lining those questions up for you. I just have such an interest in cranes and herons and egrets. They're so elegant and they seem so wise and patient as they stand there assessing their environment. But I never knew about their connection to the other world and their later assignment to St. Columcille. Could you tell us a tiny bit about that before we continue?
Yeah, and there's a fascinating book called, I think, Cur Haint by a man called Lorcan O'Tuathail. It's a daring exploration to think that our entire language, the entire Irish language, could be based on crane speak, on the word cur. There's so many examples of cur for bent or wrong, or this cur is littered throughout the Irish language. And Lorcan has the daring to say that actually cur was the sacred animal of Ireland long ago. Just like the stork, basically the stork that brings the children is, to Europe. Our version was the crane. The crane was able to stand between 2 worlds. And because of the way that he could stand on one foot with one eye open and seem to be elsewhere, it was the perfect symbol of an animal that could be between the 2 realms. And so, the key role for the Druid was that he could both operate in this world and the other world. And so, the poet then took on those roles. So how are they going to do that? They needed a symbol that could, get the information from the other world, but then could speak it into this world. And so the crane was that symbol. He stands there silently, seemingly to do nothing at all, but actually meditating, often with his eyes closed. And so that's why the poet and the Druid, up until the 17th century, they recited that, they composed their poetry, and then they recited their poetry in the dark, because it was accessing that other world for all of us. They were like the great memory bank for all of us. And it's lovely. And what would it be lovely if cranes could come back to Ireland? It's amazing in the last 10 years how herons, how they're sort of somehow they're what looks like their close cousins are now spreading right throughout Ireland to give this. And they have, to anyone who sees them, they have an otherworldly presence, I think.
Well, I have some questions that have come in on our Q&A. And the first one is from Mairead Nicraw. And her question is about an McCord do Gaelgóirí Dínig Dúchasacha a chuirt ar an féin agus cór doing smíanamh ar an Gaeilge mar Indigenous people's language, Shaka's Indigenous language. So what would be the right answer there, do you think?
Yeah, tá sé seo códachar. This is such a fraught question, because we cannot now turn around and go to native people or Indigenous people and say, we are one of you. We need to be aware that we are, as the native people of North America said, we are their younger brothers and they are willing to reach out to us. But we need to go to them with great humility and say, we're people who've just woken up. Agus tigamidanish in anion, Chiapa Maragoni gra wintigan le culture na Hoirpa, agus gra wintigan near just dirach le nuhi, shigs nurudi a har le beda le havi le blianahen. We always thought of ourselves as this European people who are part of a modernistic drive. Agus vi gairi gohuntach lei sin, croig se dawan untach. What modernity and the sort of conscious, the movement towards reason and rationalism created was this world. An amazing thing, an amazing resource. But tigamid gwilig tepe air. We were hitched onto one world that we now see is failing us, is unsustainable. So we do need to reassess our own culture. And it just happens that we find within our own roots that we have forgotten about is a lot of native knowledge. Now, it'd be arrogant of us for now then to go to people who have actually been the safeguarders of indigenous nature-based rooted landscape knowledge and say, we're now one of you. So we have to do this with great humility and only come to them and see equivalence with them if they deign to give it to us. But actually realize, we are also exploitative. Hanemer and some are derim Chervila Blianahin. Akada Harland is Nadina Avian Soroing, Nadina Lucht and Ray Neolithic. What did we do to the Neolithic people who were before us? Did they die out of a virus or did we wipe them out? And how much of their folklore and their knowledge did we keep alive? If their DNA not much of their DNA exists within us, did we take on a lot of their language or a lot of their insights? And then those Neolithic people, it's unlikely they wiped out the hunter-gatherers. It's likely the hunter-gatherers were very few in numbers, and just whether I'm sure unsa dian ha sé dakar marachtan agus ni flor geyenador yihil agus agaume and via namacha dina doiv agus the hepara. So it's likely that no one wiped out the hunter-gatherers. They just slowly retreated. But we could be the exploitative colonizers of the wonderful people who created Newgrange and the Boyne. So we cannot, with great heart say we're now Native Americans, but we need to be open to the context, the potential of looking at ourselves to a degree in that perspective, I would say.
Okay. Agus tá ceistan seo ó Janet Muller, agus an ceist tá céna leabhar tú faoin chailech imimeach, cén fá amach an bhean críne seo imimethe.
Yeah, well, Kinte, fadó ní raibh sí imimethe, bhí an ban I lár an éalaigh, bí a bhí an cuacht giléad a kit. Der tá sé sin soléir ó gach éanrad. Ach an son hánig rain na críostiachta. I mean, ní féidir an bhilánach a réine. So clearly, the feminine power was at the center of everything. We can see that from all of the old mythologies, all of the really ancient roots in Irish. Woman energy is at the root, but things happened. An easy scapegoat, but probably a possible one, is Christianity. A male force came from Rome and imposed its order and controlled everything. And then along came the Vikings, more male. Then the Normans, the English, other male influence, masculine forces about exploiting the landscape came. So, yeah, and not only in Ireland, the Harfud and Down. So, the cuach de vi ag an talamh ag an nádor ag an ólas seo buinean an Jack and them ná. So all of this was pushed to the side all over the world by a movement towards exploitation, towards male drive, towards that great movement, advancing movement and juggernaut movement of the male energy that creates amazing things but destroys so much leaves so much destruction in its wake.
You've illustrated some connections between the Irish language and languages of India. And Marge Kennedy asks, do you know anything about the Irish language and Hebrew? And are there similar links there that you know of?
Yeah, Hebrew is trickier because Hebrew isn't an Indo-European language. So we're going more blind. So yeah, like it's hard enough to go back as far as the Indo-European roots, because then, you're going back 4,000 or 5,000 years. And it's a bit muddy, but because words and cultures, and what's interesting is why did they survive? Why are they so clear in Ireland and so clear in India? If we know the Indo-European was a pan-European and pan-Western Asian thing. And it's just because the stone was dropped into the center, into the area of sort of like, Turkey or some. We as a people, our roots are in the Pontic Steppe, in the area of sort of Russia and Iran, that sort of area, and a bit of Turkey. So that's where the culture came, and then it spread out on both sides. And just like there's a lovely word. So I spent the last 3 days out among fishermen in Donegal and Galway and Mayo, asking them for Irish words. And they gave me more C Tamagotchi, more C words. And one gave me the word merog. It's a perfect skimming stone, it's a merog. But merog, according to Mickey Whiting up in Machararty, is also the rings that ripple out from a stone when dropped into water. So the Indo-European culture drops into the center, and then the meroga, the ripples, circulate out, resonate out, and they're left in the furthest extremities in Western Ireland and Eastern India. And so that's where we can see them. But then when we're getting, I make some links to Arabic. Now, clearly Arabic isn't an Indo-European language, but I can make links because there were sailing connections. That's why Arabic words might have got into Irish. But Hebrew is trickier. We just know that we can make an equivalence between an ancient language, like the root of that Indo-European language that Irish is, with the other, like Sumerian or Hebrew, these other ancient languages.
There's a question also from Kathy Fagan, and she asks about the connections between Irish and Sanskrit. And I think you've dealt with that quite well in your book. And maybe some of those sources would be available to her there.
Yeah, and I'm writing a new book at the moment about landscape, Ireland, the insights the landscape can give us into our past, into our heritage, into our consciousness, and into the other world. And that'll go deeply into just how many connections there are. You know, our entire legal system is very, very similar to the Sanskrit, the Indian system, as is our mythology has so many connections to it. The language, we've seen some examples. You know, we are the one culture that then moved out and found its own expression on two sides of the world.
We have a question from Janet Partlow, and she's wondering if you know anything about Gobnet.
I do. I adore Gobnet. Again, God, the amount we could spend weeks on just the female powers. So you remember, Gobnet was, I mean, she's now a Christian saint, but the way she was being led by nature, by bees, by wild deer, and hunting out, finding these water sources, and then using the water source as the center of her energy, of her spiritual healing power, shows that she's clearly pre-Christian. But I love it because she's saying, if we're looking at a time for hints about ecology, about people who tuned into nature and allowed nature guide them, there's no better example than Gobnet. Gobnet wanted to express the Christian love, the absolute shining love that she felt inside of Christianity, but she followed the bees, she allowed the deer, she allowed other animals lead her to it. So she's a beautiful example for a more ecological perspective.
Michael Boyle from Talamh Éisc asks, how has the academic community responded to your concepts, your insights into the landscape and the connections you've mentioned? Probably very well, I would think.
Surprisingly well. I wasn't prepared for it. I thought they'd attack me. I mean, their job is to look to dig down into the insights and to see what is actually fact. And as I was saying, a lot of this is speculative. Yeah, speculative, too strong a word. It's sort of speculative. It's based, no. It's putting the facts out there and just showing them in a different perspective. So I have had no attacks on those. I had an article on ring forts last week in the Irish Times, or 2 weeks ago, and that was attacked. Archaeologists are very specific about those, but linguists are more open. We know it's a place that we feel around. There is just echoes in the landscape of sound. You know, archaeologists will have a stone rock and they'll measurement the stone, but there's the words and mythology particularly are more fluid, and we can move into them. So, you know, we should not base our new intuitions too much on just blind intuition. We should base them on what the research is showing them. But I think there's a role for some of us to also feel inside these things too. So a mix between basing our work on the amazing work that the academics are doing, but allowing us take a creative or a poetic feel to it.
And we have a question from Martina Heinen from Ennis in County Clare, and she's just wondering if you've come across many stories which are involved with childbirth and birth and midwifery practices, or herbs, and those kind of stories on your travels.
Yeah, I mean, actually, for the landscape book I'm doing, I'm currently researching the Killeen, you know, the area around every single townland where unbaptized children were buried. And there is each baby in a Killeen has a story about a difficult birth or a society not accepting a child or something. So they are the keys. And a lot of the Killeens, there are still memories of those. Those Killeens were used up until the 1980s. A child that wasn't able to be baptized for some reason or wasn't wanted and ended up in the Killeen. So we can still touch on these. We can still find the folklore to do with these things. We can still find the herbs that were used in midwifery. Again, I'm the wrong person to do it. I have a chapter in my book about sexuality and how, you know, Ireland as Irish as a non-Victorian, non-prudish language that did not take on the constraints of Christianity about making the body disgusting or shameful. There are so many words. There's such a different attitude to the body, to the human body, the male and the female body. But me as a man looking at written sources was only able to find really male words for male sexuality. There are some women I know doing amazing research, just nothing's been published yet, but on female gender, female sexuality, by just going to the communities and asking them. Nola Ní Dhomhnaill, the great poet, said that she felt there was no words for female sexuality in Irish until she got married. And then she was invited back into the back kitchen, and suddenly that world was open to her. Tá sé fós le fáileam, tá sé fós ann, ach caithfidh duine eile seachas mise Donnabháin, I think. It requires someone else other than me to go searching for it.
Okay, and there's a tá ceistan seo ó Una Begillicuddy, and her question is, an an focail féin atá cuachtach nó focail I mail daoine le cuacht an tú féin. So is it the word or the person?
Yeah. I mean, so an question cosúlin Gaeltacht, a garting on few focail féin a chefno no gahmid an Gaeltacht a chefno. Like, it's the same as saying, do we need to protect the word itself? Is that any good, or do we need to protect the Gaeltacht? And my project, as you mentioned, my C. Tamagotchi project. So every day on Instagram and Twitter at manchán.com, I give away, I give out a new coastal word, a C word. Really, it's not going to save anybody. It's not going to protect anything by protecting one language. It highlights things. But what I would like is that Braham shigavil on cocht lasting doing gleir. Dirich tish gavil me naskaha le culture exiracht atem hofad sheed. I strongly believe that everybody of Irish ancestry, and particularly the other world in Ireland now, is the diaspora, is those 40, 50, 60, 70 million Irish people abroad. They are now the other Irish world that are just a thin veil away we can access. All of us have these roots in this heritage if we open ourselves to it. And that's what nature wants. That's what Gaia, it's what the mother goddess has always wanted, was to us connected to it. It was, the Christian church, you said it would only be certain people. I suppose you could say a degree that the Druids were, took on a certain power for themselves. But in terms of women, the Irishness ban the last sound, there were so many medicinal women in every community, in every family. So all of us, I think, can tap into it and open up to it again if we dare, if we allow ourselves.
And we have a question from Garrod O'Kelly, and he's wondering, an dóileat gúil buint idir ar mandia scéine agus na fir scéine agus an bandia saquana, sane, the sane in sa rank, agus an trev saquani, beidir buint fola, no beidir buint tengoleachta.
Even God, come a shin a lorig agus tidy and a shin ham kun smeen of shin a grid near rev clutched at rievagum fui, shin fear him all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Agus, unfortunately, we are fast approaching the end of this presentation. So finally, I actually have one more question for you, Manchán. You've mentioned frequently your grandmother, Sheila Humphreys, as being an important figure in your life for many different reasons. And you bring a facet of her life, her connection to An Gaeilge, to us all through your book. Do you ever think of how she might respond to it, specifically say its success during this trying period we've had of the pandemic, the quiet life we've had? And of course, she lived through a pandemic. Maybe it's given us time to think, given time to people to reflect.
Oh wow, Shin Kesh Dacker, that talk Takanishigam. Yes, Sweeney's River. What a question. I've never thought about that. That's powerful. Yeah, she was born in 1899. In 1912, she moves out to the Blaskets with her uncle, with the O'Reilly, and her mother and her aunt. And they're living with Tommaso Crihan, sleeping on the floor of his house, of Peg Sayre's house, of the king's house, collecting seagulls' eggs, killing seals, gathering together in a mehel, in a gathering to bring in the turf. And all her life was devoted, as you say, to the Irish language, mainly because 4 years after that, 1912, they go to the Blaskets, 1913, 1914, and then 1916, the O'Reilly goes out, my great-granduncle, and knows he's going to die, kisses his 4 sons and his wife, his pregnant wife, goodbye. And for that moment ever, my granny devoted her life to his cause, to her uncle's cause, keeping the language alive, maintaining the language. And I come along in 1970, that was all she wanted me to do. And I had no interest in Dublin in the 1970s. She had to bribe me to listen to her words, to listen to the beautiful insight she gave me, and to pull my ear, to make me hear when a local man would say, "Casanukar in Aignigrena," turn the key against the sun to unlock a door. The concept that she told me, listen to this man. He is making you see that the cylinder of the lock needs to be turned in rhythm with a star at the center of our solar system if you want to open it. She blew my mind over and over again, and I turned my back on it so often. And as you say, this book could never have been written without her. So I won't say more than that in case I cry, but Hilary, Gurmila Magat, it hadn't even dawned on me the power of that.
Well, I think with that, I'd like to thank you so much, Manchán, for being with us today. And thank all of our attendees. I have many more questions, which I will pass on to you, Manchán. Some of them are very interesting, but unfortunately, we just don't have time. We need, as some person mentioned in the question and answer, we need part 2. So let's hope we can do a part 2 sometime in the near future.
So
Everybody who's here, please join us at Luxman Ireland House for our continuing public event series, and the details may be found on our website. They can all show airfall ar ganel YouTube amakansa. The talk will soon be available on our YouTube channel. I must apologize, as I said earlier, for the 2 breaks, but these things happen, and I'm convinced it was a puka. Jerry O'Sullivan will accompany us out again today with his tune Adieu, Adieu, Thou Faithless World, from his O'Sullivan Meets O'Farrell collection. Is Misha Hilary Vixivna, agus gurv mi le maha grif galer, agus slán go fóil.